All right. Well, hello, everyone. It is now 8:01 Honduras time. So we will begin our event. So greetings to you all. Thank you so much for joining the Faith and Public Integrity Network as we explore this year's theme for Global Integrity Day, which is corruption and poverty. Our event today will feature the work of the Asociación para una Sociedad Más Justa in Honduras, which is also known as ASJ Honduras. And we will provide an overview of Global Integrity Day and recent examples of similar global initiatives. At the end, we will have a time for questions and answers with both of our speakers. Just a few details before we begin. As you can see, you are all on mute right now, and we ask that you remain on mute as we listen to our speakers. As I mentioned, there will be a time to ask questions at the end, so you are free to unmute yourself then if you would like to ask a question. Please feel free to also use the chat to introduce yourselves and write down questions to be answered at the end. Also, if you need technical assistance, please send us a message through the chat. And with that, we will begin the event. Before I hand it over to Kayla Garcia, the Director of Governance and Public Management at ASJ Honduras, to share about ASJ's work, we will watch a video that describes that work. So I will put the link to the video in the chat. And the video is about 5 minutes. So please go ahead and just watch this video on your own without exiting the call. I will call everyone back in about 5 minutes, and then I will hand it over to Kayla Garcia to begin her presentation then. So please go ahead and watch the video at this time. All right, I hope everyone was able to watch the video. At this time, we will continue with the event, so I will hand it over to Kayla Garcia to begin her presentation.
Thank you, Allison. Good morning, everyone. It is really a privilege to be here this morning and share our work seeking integrity in Honduran public systems. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'd like to start with this presentation with an introduction of who we are and what we do, and then talk about why systems of integrity are important in the public sector and in institutions. Then we'll go through ASJ's mechanisms to promote integrity in public institutions. And also we'll talk a little bit about what you saw on the video, and that is our work to audit COVID-19 emergency purchases. And we will end this talk talking about how we promote integrity within ASJ's teams, and also how we can do that in our zone of influence. So I am Kayla Garcia, Director of Governance and Public Management at the Asociación para una Sociedad Más Justa, Association for a More Just Society. That's what ASJ stands for. We are a Honduran civil society organization of brave Christians dedicated to promoting justice and making public systems work for all Hondurans. We do this in 4 priority sectors because we believe that there is no justice without access to health and without access to education, justice, and security, and to transparency and democracy. These sectors are related to basic human rights, and that's why we have decided to focus our work on these sectors. We have been working in this or doing this work for over 20 years, and we have been able to achieve an improved oversight of medicine in the health sector, in the public health sector. We also reached 200 days of school, and when our schools were only having 120 days at that time. And we were also part of a historic purge of 5,000 police officers in the last years. So why do we need systems of integrity? At ASJ, we believe that integrity is a solution to corruption, really. We can tackle corruption by building systems of integrity in public institutions and in all societal structures in general. And this is necessary because we live in a fallen world where our human nature is always tempted. And we can see that in the Bible, in James chapter 1, verses 13 to 15, that says, "And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, 'God is tempting me.' God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drags us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and this is a direct consequence of the fall, really. Before the fall, there was no need for a big set of rules, or even the 10 Commandments were given to us after that, after Adam and Eve decided to eat from the tree of the knowledge of evil and good. And that's how our eyes were open to evil, really. And that's why we feel tempted continuously. And that is why we need systems of integrity that will keep us from straying, or will help us to stay on track. And these are three key elements in a system of integrity: accountability, transparency, and control mechanisms, because they're effective ways to reduce the risk of falling into corrupt actions or immoral, illegal practice, or any other action that is against God's rules and therefore harmful to humankind or to our neighbors, like the Bible says, really. And when we talk about corrupt actions, we talk it in a wide sense, where that means that we do something, or that we use something that is entrusted to us for something different than what is intended to be originally. And that's why it is important to work on systems of integrity that will help us to keep away from that. And how does ASJ promote systems of integrity? And we do this by demanding transparency and accountability from the public government, public institutions. We carry out social monitoring. We make formal requests and publicly report instances of corruption. We also create online sites available to the public where we disclose information on public management and their results, as well as the main problems and solutions. These are our proposals. And I have a picture here. So vacunas abiertas, open vaccines, really, the COVID-19 vaccines, that gives information about how many vaccines we're getting, and all the regions that have received vaccinations, and just to help the public to know what to expect. We also put there the national plan for vaccinations, and this is just an example for that. We also collaborate with public officials to design public policies or find solutions in order to reduce the risk of corruption and reduce discretionary actions. As I said before, we need a clear set of rules and avoid discretionary actions because of our nature. And we also pressure institutions to have effective control mechanisms, and that is internal or external mechanisms or tools such as audits or any other tool like checklists or information systems that will help them to control their processes and what they're doing to make sure that they're following the steps that are intended to. We also carry out compliance reviews and social audits. This is what we do at the direction of my department, the Public Management Department. We conduct these compliance reviews in three key areas of the public management, and this is procurement, human resources management, and results-based indicators. So we try to do these reviews and also provide recommendations for them to strengthen their processes and reduce corruption risks and be more transparent. We also look into emblematic cases and file claims and do the follow-up to them with the public institutions in charge of working with these cases. This is in general how we try to promote systems of integrity. Of course, I can answer more detailed questions at the end of the presentation, or you can contact me for more information about it. In our contribution to the health sector during the COVID-19 crisis is what you saw in the video. Through those actions, we uncovered that government's non-compliance, and that is contracts awarded without proper procurement and without essential steps, really. We were able to verify that there was price gouging, and also contracts were awarded to unqualified suppliers that really didn't deliver what they were supposed to. And we also helped to create steps to ensure effective purchases in the future, especially for the COVID-19 emergency. Some of our recommendations and demands with this work were a comprehensive national plan to address the COVID-19 emergency. And we said this should be done by health experts and not politicians, like we saw at the beginning of last year, really. And we also demanded oversight of emergency purchases because we saw a lot of non-compliance, and also because of that, even though we paid over $47 million for 7 mobile hospitals, we at this moment, 1 year later, we have no hospitals functioning here in the country. So that's because they didn't follow the procedure. They didn't make sure they were doing it to qualified suppliers in what you saw in the video. So we demanded more transparency, and because we use media outlets to make public order results, we saw a lot of our population demanding transparency and also justice and investigation into the public servants who were involved in mismanagement and non-compliance. And because of that, officials intervened and InvestH, that's the procurement office in charge of the emergency purchases, and the executive director resigned after being exposed. And both he and the general administrator are being investigated, and they're imprisoned by Honduran authorities. So this is just an example of how we use our different programs to collaborate with the public systems to seek justice in the health sector. And to end this presentation, I would like to mention a few words about how we promote integrity in our work in our zone of influence. We try to live out what we demand from others, and that means that we try to have a clear set of policies and values that define what is unacceptable, because we have to make sure their employees are clear about that. You know that in general in our world, relativism is deeply rooted. So it's like not all of us work with the same values or moral or ethics. And that's why we try to define what is unacceptable in our job and what we try to promote in the public system. Honesty is very important, and especially when it is related to the use of our time and resources at the office. And that is important to promote in the public system as well, since they're using public resources destined for the common good. We try to be respectful of law and best practices. And that means in the case of that unit I work with, being a good guard of the information we handle, since we're doing compliance reviews and demanding a lot of information from public institutions. We have access to a lot of private information, information related to persons who work in the government or to beneficiaries, and we must be responsible and respect what law says about that information. We cannot disclose what is private, and that's something that we emphasize a lot in our work. And especially, we like to talk about about seeing that we are understanding that we are not managers or owners, that we're not owners, sorry, that we're stewards or managers of what we have been entrusted. And this, we emphasize this at ASJ with the resources that our donors or the institution is giving us. But this applies to our life in general. And when I recognize that I am steward of what God has given me, those resources are intended for God's will, plan, or purpose, and I must stick to it. So this is like a perspective that we change the way we act and work wherever we are at. So this is a constant conversation we have at ASJ, and that we see that there is a challenge to promote this within public servants, but we try to do that. And even in our own families and churches, we must talk about this, about us being stewards, and have clear rules and non-negotiables, really, and understand that there are consequences of everything we do and live out what we believe as Christians. And in general, these are the ways that we think we can change our society, or starting with the family, our church, the organization we work with, and finally with the country we live in. So thank you very much for your attention. This is what I wanted to share with you today.
Thank you, Kayla, for sharing more about ASJ Honduras's work and how it seeks and promotes integrity. It's very encouraging to hear an example of, just one of many organizations that seeks integrity, within the organization, but also within your community, within the country. So thank you for sharing. We will now be hearing from Kelly O'Donnell, a consulting psychologist and one of the coordinators of Global Integrity Day, as he shares more about the day we are commemorating today. So up to you, Kelly.
Thank you. Sorry for the slow start there. Thanks, Allison. And Kayla, thank you very, very much for your overview. And I just very much appreciate what you were sharing. And like some of the colleagues on the call today on this special event, we were present about a year and a half ago in Honduras, in Tegucigalpa, at the special commemoration dedication of the new building. And so we saw firsthand a lot of the concepts and principles and the people that are putting these things into practice. So very relevant, and just delighted that Faith and Public Integrity Network is organizing this special event, and that ASJ is really the focus organization helping to kick off Global Integrity Day this year. So ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, thank you very much for participating in this special event. I have about 10 minutes to share briefly about what Global Integrity Day is about. And along with that, a second part will be just briefly touching on additional global initiatives. So Global Integrity Day is a global initiative focusing on integrity, anti-corruption, but as we know, there's many other major ones. And I just want to touch base on about some of those to put a context on it, with the view to help support your work and maybe to give you some ideas how you might be able to further trek and track with the world community's efforts to confront corruption and to live in integrity. So we start off real quickly with three definitions. Okay, what is global integrity about? What's integrity mean? And this is the definition that we work with. Integrity is moral wholeness, living consistently in moral wholeness. Corruption is moral rottenness, the opposite of integrity. And so we invented a new word called integrati to kind of typify what corruption is. It's the distortion, perversion, and deterioration of moral goodness, abusing and exploiting people and the planet. So we're really focusing too on global integrity. So what is that about? Not just individual integrity, but global integrity is living consistently in moral wholeness at all levels, in all areas of our spheres of influence, from the individual to the institutional, to the international, local through global, within sectors, within different settings, and in the systemic and in the structural areas as well of our societies. 4 things about Global Integrity Day, which really guide this. It's been about 1 year now since this has been launched and kicking out. 4 purposes, you might say. We see it as a positive day, pro-integrity. It's something positive. Often when we think of corruption, it can be just overwhelming and really negative when we see what really is going on and devastating people, fellow humans. But we want to start out in a positive note, sincerely. It's a positive day where we want to reflect, teach, and collaborate on ways to integrate integrity in all we do throughout the entire year. Secondly, it's a strategic day, and we want to do three strategic things. We want to encourage cultivating lifestyles of integrity from the individual through the international levels. Secondly, we want to join together to address the causes and consequences of corruption in its many forms. And third, we want to work towards just and equitable societies that are marked with well-being for all people and the planet. The third of 4 areas, it's also a solemn day. And this might set it off from other initiatives or set it apart, in that we want to help encourage people to consider your ways, consider our ways. Are we lying? Are we stealing in any ways, big or small? And if so, then stop it. If we need to right a wrong we have done, then do so. And if we need to prudently confront wrongdoing at any level, preferably in solidarity with colleagues for mutual support and greater impact, then do so. And finally, Global Integrity Day is, we see it as a companion day to complement the United Nations International Anti-Corruption Day, which is on the 9th of December, and vice versa, complement each other. Both days are rallying points, and they're exactly 6 months apart. And they're rallying points for people to come together to organize events, share initiatives, and involve more people in the public. So this sort of lays out why we think this day is relevant, its potential, and where it's heading. The theme this year is corruption and poverty. And one way to look at it, another shorthand, is to talk about probity for poverty. It sounds kind of good in English, probity for poverty. And probity is defined as the quality of having strong moral principles, honesty, and decency. And the issue before us this year, and when you look online at the various resources and some of the things we're supporting and getting behind in other events, if we want to resolutely, quote, end poverty in all of its forms everywhere, that is Sustainable Development Goal 1, how can we, quote, substantially reduce corruption and bribery in all their forms, SDG 16.5. In other words, and this is key, this is the core, how can multi-dimensional probity, that is integrity at all levels, individual, institutional, international, how can multi-dimensional probity help curtail corruption's role in multi-dimensional poverty? And we've heard some aspects of that already from ASJ today. So I'm not going to go through these, but here are the 4 relevant, and there's more, but 4 main relevant sustainable development goals that reflect to the probity connecting to poverty. And by the way, the stats do show that about $2.6 trillion is stolen every year or lost every year to corruption. And the stats also show, in terms of the United Nations Development Program, about 1.3 billion humans living in multi-dimensional poverty. So it's sort of an interesting little figure to put together, 2.6 trillion and 1.3 billion. So what's the relationship between that, the corruption and poverty, and these metrics? Continuing. So that's a little bit about Global Integrity Day. And when I finish my presentation in a few minutes, I'll come back to that, steps forward and the ways forward. But among the myriad of anti-corruption organizations and initiatives and integrity initiatives, here's 4 that I want to briefly touch on. First is the Global Integrity Network from the Lausanne World Evangelical Alliance, faith-based group, Christian. Second are just a few examples among many by the United Nations, especially what just took place a few days ago that I attended about a third of it, 20 hours over 3 days, the special session against corruption. This was the 32nd special session in the history of the General Assembly over 75 years. So the fact that anti-corruption and corruption things are getting such priority is really significant, and it's really worth tuning into the archives and the videos. I'll share more about that. Third is during the spring meetings of the World Bank Group and International Monetary Fund, there were a number of meetings related to corruption and integrity, and I'll link to one and show you that. I'll give you the link. And then fourth, what we probably all know about Transparency International, especially the Corruption Perceptions Index, and they're the secretariat also of the International Anti-Corruption Conference. Then a final slide on a list of some other initiatives to help us truck and track. So let me just go to that phrase, truck and track, or rather tracking and trekking. I'm hoping that wherever you're at in your involvement in integrity and anti-corruption, that some of these resources will really support you. It's very easy to be overwhelmed by all that's going on, and frequently I feel overwhelmed and kind of dumb, frankly, like, oh, I didn't know about that, or I didn't know the UN was set up to do that. But the more I dig into these global initiatives, these macro things, at both the international level and down in the regional and national level, the more I am amazed and appreciative of what is really, really going on, as well as what I'm a bit out of touch with. So the thought is, and the encouragement here is, what could you individually in your respective organizations be tracking with and trekking together with, along with better in terms of these initiatives? First one I've mentioned is the Global Integrity Network, which is set up by the Lausanne Movement and the World Evangelical Alliance. And they exist to help the church primarily to promote integrity and to develop anti-corruption efforts. And so there's a team that's involved doing that, holding workshops, sharing resources online. And most recently, and this is available online on May 1st, there was a special 2-hour conference. And I think people on this call, on the special event right now, were there. And you can tune into the special 12-minute, short and sweet, 12-minute presentations there, and the breakout sessions as well. But the 3 presentations were on integrity for the individual, second was integrity on the church, for the church, and the third was integrity in society. And I really want to commend this to you, and as you have time to review it. Second has to do with United Nations initiatives. And I just want to quote UN Secretary Antonio Guterres, his statement on corruption in the context of COVID-19. And for, I think, a lot of us, this summarizes what galvanizes us, what concerns us, and what we want to fight for. Corruption is criminal, immoral, and the ultimate betrayal of public trust. We must hold leaders to account. A vibrant civic space and open access to information are essential. We must protect the rights and recognize the courage of whistleblowers who expose wrongdoing. As an age-old plague takes on new forms, let us combat it with new heights of resolve. I'm going to skip over this because of the time, but just to note that Antonio Guterres early this year identified 10 UN priorities for 2021. Needless to say, every one of these areas is subject to corruption, and confronting corruption in these areas is huge, whether it's the health sector all the way down to the last one, poverty and inequality. I mentioned that a few days ago, there was a special session of the United Nations General Assembly, and you'll have access to this PowerPoint. And here are some links and some suggested short speeches, as well as the civil society special 80-minute session that I believe would be very, very supportive of your work. It all revolved around a political declaration. At the very bottom, you'll see the final paragraph called "Our Common Commitment to Effectively Address Challenges in Implementing Measures to Prevent and Combat Corruption and Strengthen International Cooperation." All of this was done to support the UN Convention Against Corruption from 2003, which is more information there. Apologize for moving very quickly because I'm actually a bit out of time, but I just want to go another couple of minutes if you'll just let me. A third of 4 areas, initiatives I want to touch on is the anti-corruption collective actions, presentation, what have we learned, lessons from the ground. And this was from the, sorry, give me a second. I've just lost something here. Yeah, this was from the World Bank in March, one of the presentations that was done. And it is really, really worth watching again to see what is it really like on the ground. What are it's just not the rhetoric, but what are the realities at kind of high levels as well as in community levels, what's going on. And then the fourth area is the many, many resources and initiatives of Transparency International. I'm not sure if you're aware, but they are the secretariat for the International Anti-Corruption Conference every 2 years. And late last year, This is available online for free. It's worth watching the opening plenary. They also spotlighted 8 independent films from different countries dealing with corruption that are just amazing, putting flesh on the bones. And then finally, you might find this to be really helpful, the 4th plenary, Breaking the Vicious Cycles of Dirty Money and Impunity. Very practical, alarming, encouraging all at the same time. The resources which the resource which I think Transparency International is most famous for, most known for, is the Corruption Perceptions Index, and I'll leave that to you to look at. My one point, though, is to say that, like so many years, 2/3 of countries that are assessed on it score below the 50 mark. So it's on a scale between 0 and 100, but about 2/3 of our countries score below the 50 score mark, which is really significant. That's not really good. Every country is a developing country when it comes to developing anti-corruption efforts and pro-integrity efforts. So this brings us to close to the end of my brief presentation. Here are some more core global initiatives to access to study. And rather than going through the list, I'd like to just quote the final one, which is an action plan that I was privileged to go to. I was in Gyeongju, Korea in 2016 for this United Nations conference on education for global citizenship. And I'm just pulling out one of the conclusions, one of the principles in the action plan. And I'm pointing this out because anti-corruption, pro-integrity begins in the heart. It's systemic. We've got to put controls in place, but our educational systems, informal, formal, non-formal, have a huge role to play in helping people be people of integrity and moral people. So here's the quote: education must advance the cause of global citizenship, which promotes integrated development of the whole person, emotionally, ethically, intellectually, physically, socially, and spiritually, imbued with an understanding of our roles, rights, and responsibilities for the common good in the service of to humanity, and the advancement of a culture of peace, nonviolence, freedom, justice, and equality. And this short document I commend to you to review, and it certainly has influenced my life. Where are we going from here now? I'm shifting from global initiatives in general back to Global Integrity Day as a growing initial, in its initial phase. What are some of the next steps? How might you be able to contribute to it? How could it support you? First of all, colleagues, friends, feel free to share resources on the JID's website. Feel free to share and link the JEB website on your own websites and mention it in your blogs. And there's a place for organizations, projects, networks to actually endorse Global Integrity Day quite simply at the end. Secondly, at this point, I think it's going to be very important to have a coordinating team form from different organizations. Right now, it's Kelly and Michelle who've kind of helped kick it off with a lot of support from others, but forming a coordinating team that could take this to its next phase, next step is important. Next, I think it would be really helpful in terms of the world community's efforts, global community's efforts, to organize tangibly, visibly special events and initiatives around 2 times during the calendar year. Around the 9th of June for Global Integrity Day, and then the 9th of December for United Nations International Anti-Corruption Day. These are 6 months apart. It makes sense to rally and coordinate things twice a year, 6 months apart. And then finally, I think it's really important to align Global Integrity Day and the UN International Anti-Corruption Day more explicitly. Then we want to connect Global Integrity Day with other initiatives and organizations. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Okay, thank you very much. In conclusion, I want to say, I hope we can continue to go forward with Global Integrity Day, as well as your respective works that I know many of them personally are very valuable and important. And I really thank you sincerely for participating today in this special event, this spotlight event. Over to you, Allison. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, for that overview and for encouraging us by sharing other initiatives and resources that seek to promote integrity. Both Kelly's PowerPoint and Kayla's PowerPoint will be available on the FPIN website later on, so you will have access to all of this information and the resources. With that, we will now move into a time for questions and answers. If you would like to ask your question directly, please feel free to unmute yourself. You will find the button to unmute on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat as well, and we will make sure to address those.
Well, I have a question, if I could. I see Martin just put his hand up too.
You go
But,
first, Paul.
Thank you, Martin. My question would be if ASJ in Honduras could tell us how they developed and won the confidence of government authorities, and namely how they were able to essentially win the confidence of those authorities so that they were viewed as legitimate actors. So maybe you could address this, Kayla, or one of your colleagues.
Yeah, well, thank you, Robert, for your question. It's a good one. Well, I would say that it's been a long road, really. As I said before, we have been doing this work for over 20 years. And at the beginning, by the beginning, I mean probably the first 10 years, we were doing mostly research or working on policies and giving recommendations and making public reports, but we wouldn't get the confidence or all the attention that we needed from the authorities. And one of the things that we realized was that if we were just like denouncing or just pointing out the problems and probably giving our perspective on solutions, wouldn't have the same result as if we would come over and sit down with them and try to collaborate. And that also involves a high risk that many people won't see that with good eyes, or will see it as a good thing to do, because they think that you shouldn't be close to government people or authorities, especially when they have been criticized or pointed out as corrupt people like our president, for instance. But if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be so close to the power, that's how we say it, to be able to incidir, Jill, I need help, to contribute and to make our voices be heard. So we actually came and presented a lot of proposals and trying to show them that we were actually qualified to give an opinion. Of course, it is our right as citizens to say something and also to make proposals. But in countries like ours, they wouldn't recognize our capacity. So we have to prove that with good research, with good proposals, because many times it's not that they're just corrupt people. Sometimes they really don't know what the solution is, how to solve it, or they don't have a group of people that is supporting them. And that's how, when we were able to convince them that we were there to collaborate, they will start accepting step by step our help. Sometimes even we're using resources from our donors to pay for activities that should be paid by them, but they say I don't have the budget to do it, or I need permission from this high level of officials, and it's difficult to get it. And so they have seen that we have been able to allocate resources or to even talk. We're connected to different key stakeholders like donors, governments, other civil society organizations, so they could see that our contribution was valuable and we could help to move things forward. And at the end, we said, this will make you look good as well. I mean, this is for you to do a good job, and it's not just for us. Actually, during the first 10 years, no many people would knew about ASJ because we were working with low profile. We wouldn't say ASJ is doing this at the community for security reasons. These are the results of the public ministry of the police, even though we had paid for a lot of those activities. But then we decided because we needed to gain confidence to start to making our work more public and then gain confidence. And probably, I'm sorry, that was a long answer, but I hope I was able to give you some idea of how we built this relationship.
Thank you, Kayla. If I could just come in on behalf of Honduras, I wanted to point out that exactly 7 days ago, right when Kayla was speaking, the president of Honduras was addressing the United Nations General Assembly, and it was being live streamed around the world. And he was talking about his firm commitment and his country's firm commitment to anti-corruption, as indeed other heads of states were talking about during the special session. And you can actually watch it on the link that you're going to see on the PowerPoint. It's at 1 hour and 17 minutes. It's a 5-minute speech. But the point is this: I think you'll find things which he is saying which corroborate and link a lot with what ASJ is doing and what they're talking about. And the political declaration that was approved 7 days ago by the member states in the United Nations is a tool to use to hold our governments at all levels accountable. Not only this, in terms of this political declaration, but we have the video recordings of heads of state and ministers of finance all saying we are supporting this, and these are the measures we are taking. We are serious about anti-corruption. So I encourage us to find ways to use that as a tool as you look through the video archive to find a particular country that you might be working in or interested in, and use it as a way to be supportive, but also hold our governments accountable.
I see that both Martin and Dr. Gershon have hands raised if you'd like to ask your questions.
Gershon, you go ahead. Gershon, you're on mute. I'm hoping Gershon's connection is okay. Are you able to hear us, Gershon?
I can hear you very well.
Great,
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Yes, Kerry, I think mine is not just a question, but it is the whole idea of Global Integrity Day. To me, this is a major contribution of, say, Christianity to the world today. When I wrote my book, When the Best is Corrupt, that is what I had in mind. I was thinking that I was alone fighting corruption here in Kenya, only to discover now that corruption is a universal problem which needs special attention by all lovers of integrity. What amazes me more than anything else is that in the world today, people are talking more of corruption than integrity. Integrity appears to be in the background. And I think time has come when integrity, the whole idea, the concept of integrity should be now in the forefront, not behind corruption. We should be talking more of integrity than corruption. So the idea I'm trying to share with you here is that the fundamental problem is not that we don't know what integrity is and what corruption is. The definitions are there, theories are there, knowledge is available. What I consider to be the fundamental problem in this matter is an transforming education. education that does not change people from being, call it primitive, or being wild like animals, into being human being. There is absence of that in the world today. So the problem is not ignorance. We know it, we understand it, but transforming education, transforming religion, Christianity, causing people to be changed and transformed and formed into a character that can stand against corruption. Corruption is a great temptation. It is earning without working. You're just asking, please stretch your hand and you get it, and you change your life from what you are to something else. And that is very attractive, particularly to the people who have no fundamental understanding of the evils underlying corruption. So the idea here, and what we're talking about here, is really not knowledge. We know it all. We understand it all. We can define it. We can write papers on that. But the knowledge that transforms and forms a human character that obeys the law, that obeys any law, even when you are alone somewhere, is what is lacking. And I think the word integrity should be emphasized more than all other things we are talking about here. So that is my stand, and that's what I feel. And what has challenged me is the request to participate in Global Integrity Day. How can I contribute in that organization, in that group of men and women who have said that we are here and we are ready to advance integrity in the world? God bless you.
Yeah, thank you, Gershon. I so appreciate what you have said. And I do want to say, forgive me, Allison, because I'm jumping into your role, but Roberto Lever wrote something in the chat. I was just wondering if you could clarify that about integrity and OECD.
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. Great presentations. Very significant point. I would say that the OECD has taken lead. The OECD is the Organization for Economic Development, which groups most of the developed countries and some developing countries, and they are really leading in the integrity agenda. So I would recommend anyone to go into their website. The OECD is one of the first anti-bribery conventions was adopted by the OECD, but they are really promoting integrity in a very holistic way. And I think that really opens up opportunities for faith and religious communities. And I think other organizations also have spoken in those terms that really we need to emphasize integrity. In fact, Transparency International has made that point. It's still, I would say it's not mainstream, but I think there are some good signs and good developments there.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I think we'll have time for a couple more questions. So we have Martin and then also a question from Eddie in the chat afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. So fully agree with what's being said about the importance of educating, raising people with values of integrity. At the same time, Kayla, you talked about the need for systems of accountability, and there are some technical aspects to that. So I've got one very specific question. You mentioned that some legal cases are going to be brought given the corruption that's gone on with COVID. And I wonder, do you have a sense of how confident you are about the court system functioning justly in Honduras? That's a very specific question. And then a slightly broader one, which is, do you have any advice for any organization in another country that might want to adopt the sort of auditing and monitoring approach that ASJ has developed, about where they might start. So ASJ has got 80 staff. Lots of places would be starting with 1 or 2 people. So any suggestions about where to begin? Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Great questions. I'll have to admit that, like in many other countries, our courts are really handled or controlled by a group of people, really. It's not independent. There is a lot of corruption there, and that's actually one of the biggest frustrations for people fighting against corruption. So just in the recent years, we had what we called a commission, a corruption commission called the MACSI. And this commission was organized by the Organization of American States and with the permission of the president. And they actually had very big cases, corruption cases, and they presented it to court. But at the end, they actually, well, they actually managed to make reforms to our legal frameworks to be able to close the cases because they were really close to getting really a sentence, to get a sentence in the system. So they actually made those reforms, and they were free. They're free now. For instance, the first lady, the wife of our former president, Pepe Lobo, who called Pepe Lobo, she was imprisoned because of one of those cases. But at the end, with those reforms, she was left out of jail this year. So you see that it's not just court, it's the whole system. If the court hasn't been able, because of the pressure, external pressure, they have the case and they need, it's like they are acorralados still. They have no other exit or way out but to declare them guilty. So they find another solution with together with the president and other politicians who were also involved in those cases. So at the end, we say they are all preparing a shield for the whole elite there, I mean, to protect themselves. So that's a problem, really, that we have to deal with. But we think, and this is something that we've talked about in Transparency International Network, even though we don't get a sentence, these people's reputation in the country is not as it used to be. I mean, they get punished at least in a moral way, because, for instance, the executive director of this procurement office I talked about in the video, we'll talk about in the video, and here that did the emergency purchases. This person was respected and was very close to the president, and really he's young, I would say not even 50 years old. He was just, his career was going up really. And now he is in jail. And if you talk to any Honduran, this person will refer to Marco Bogran, that's his name, like, wow, he's such a corrupt man. So at the end, we say, well, they get a moral punishment, really. So that's one of the things that encourages at this point. So regarding your second question, I would probably say, well, I have to admit that this work has sustainability challenges like many other initiatives, really, not just because of the cost, but in general because of the system, how the system works. You know that to get sustainable improvements there, it needs a long-term work through different governments in our countries. Every time a new administration takes over, like everything stops. And like you need to, we act like a memory, as a memory that where we come to each new minister or president or officers and present what has been done in the past and what we were working with them. And these are the processes that you should be working on, and you should take this as part of our planning and that kind of things. So that means that you have a long-term team on the first place. And also qualified people that knows the legal frameworks, the public management, how public management works. I mean, you need to have certain specific qualifications, and then have access to information, to public information. So one of the things that I would suggest is, like, if you can't have like a big team, you should push for put pressure for transparency and make sure that the institutions are publishing what they're supposed to be making public. And with that information, you can still design a tool based on your legal framework or your laws or the procedures established for what you want to measure. And then you can have a simplified tool and verify if they're fulfilling, at least based on what they're making public, or use your public information law. Many countries have gotten this commitment, with the United Nations and other international frameworks or agreements to say that they should have this transparency law and work with that. So at least those three elements will have to start something, developing a methodology that they can still they can build on that or expand afterwards. Hope that helps, Martin. Thank you for those great questions.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. And just very briefly, it occurred to me after I asked the question that something we're seeing happening in the Philippines at the moment is that after a lot of work from a Christian organization, it appears that the government itself is willing to fund some systems that will make parts of the government more accountable. And it would be, because governments control such huge resources, and it's a drop in the bucket to them, whereas it might be unimaginable riches to a church or a Christian NGO. So that would be great if that could happen more widely, that governments might make funding available for accountability systems.
Thank you. And if I, sorry.
I'd like to add to that, yes, we are actually trying to help our government to build a system, to create a system. That's very important. That's the first part. They all should have an effective system, because sometimes, like here, they have it on paper, but it doesn't work. But then they also need an external control system, an objective one, and also that should keep its independence. That's one of the reasons why we don't accept the money from government, because then they feel like they're paying to you and they want to tell you what to say and what to do or what not to do. So those are key things that you need to keep in mind.
For the final question of our time today, Eddie Fonseca wrote in the chat, what kind of professional or regulatory frameworks do you use in ASJ's methodology practices in order to achieve the ASJ's goals? Kayla, I saw that you responded in the chat, but I was wondering if you would like to elaborate a little bit and share with everyone your response to that question.
Thanks, Alison. Well, I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly. So Eddie, you can tell me if I'm not on the right path. But well, for us, what we use in order to do our compliance reviews or audits, or even verifying inside the processes, we base all of our tools or methodologies on the existing legal framework. That means laws, manuals, or any other protocol that will allow us to understand what's the procedure that should be applied and has been designed for a specific process. And also we're doing analysis of that and compare it to international practices or benchmarks in order to provide an opinion on how good that is as well. It's not just if it might be a bad one, and we don't want just to verify that they're following or sticking to the bad process. We give an opinion on how good that is compared to others, and then prepare or design a tool, a checklist tool that will help us to have an objective verification of that. I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, Eddie, or if internally how we have a regulatory, you said, framework. Well, if I talk about ASJ, of course, our work is born from a biblical or Christian perspective about building a just society, a more just society where people can be treated equally, just like I would want to. So that's why our values talk about justice, equality, and as I said in my presentation, about
Kayla, you've gone to mute. Kayla, you're on mute.
Hello, Kayla, do you mind repeating what you last said? We missed that part of it. We couldn't hear you. Sorry, we still can't hear you.
I'll try with my other device. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes. Well, don't you hear a feedback?
No,
Okay.
there's no feedback.
Okay, as I said, we're a Christian Earth organization, so our values are based on a lot on the Bible and seeking God's justice and promoting those values and using our resources for God's mission, really. We say that's God's mission. And I'm sorry, I'm having troubles because the electricity went off. If that's why you see the dark screen, and probably that's why it started to fail. But I hope you heard.
Thank you, Kayla and Kelly, for your responses. And thank you to everyone for your questions and for participating in this discussion. And the conversation does not have to end here, so please feel free to share your contact information with one another if you would like to continue talking offline. Really quickly before we end, for those of you who are not FPIN members, I would like to share a little bit about our network with you. The Faith and Public Integrity Network aims to address corruption by nurturing and developing an enduring global community of Christians who are pursuing public integrity work in their own contexts around the globe. Our focus is on building relational connections among our members, of which about 70% hold positions of leadership in their organizations. We provide a space so our members can connect personally, work towards technical collaboration, and offer personal, spiritual, and professional support in this challenging work. If you are interested in learning more about the network, becoming a member, or participating in other events like this in the future, you can visit our website, which I will write in the chat in a moment, or you can send me an email. I serve as the administrator for the network, and my name is Allison Bassett. That will also be in the chat. You can also follow us on Facebook and sign up to receive our newsletters, to receive news on upcoming events and resources. So I will just put all of this information in the chat so you can see it right there for the website, my email, our Facebook page, and where you can sign up to receive our newsletters. And so with that, that concludes our event for today. Thank you to both Kayla Garcia and Kelly O'Donnell for sharing about your work with us and encouraging us through that. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this conversation. I hope you all have a good rest of your day.